Leafs trade talks are escalating as a brand new report has dropped revealing a shocking Leafs trade update as management is interested in a very interesting defenseman. We're going to break down exactly who that is as well as discuss a rumor that is circulated surrounding a blockbuster trade between the Toronto Maple Leafs and the Anaheim Ducks. Stay tuned for all that in this episode, but before we get into that all, we are proud to announce that this video is brought to you by Rentals.ca, who are proud supporters of Team Canada. And while they've been supporting our national team defend their home court in international competition, they've also been helping thousands of Canadians find their home floor all across the country. And it doesn't matter whether you're in Toronto, Vancouver, Montreal, Calgary, Halifax, Winnipeg, Mississauga, Edmonton, Victoria, St. John's. From coast to coast, Rentals.ca has a ton of options to find the perfect place and price for you.
Their website is clean and easy to use, and you can pinpoint exactly on the map where you want to move, finding all the options in your area. Find your home court with rentals.ca.
Check out the link in the pinned comment as well as the description down below. And thank you again to Rentals.ca for supporting us, supporting Team Canada, and supporting you guys in finding the best rentals across the country. So thank you again to Rentals.ca for sponsoring this video. Darius, there's some crazy things to discuss today, and it is surrounding Jacob Trouba, that is. And it's very intriguing because the report is dropped, and let's just dive right into it. There's a lot to go over here. Maple Leafs management, according to Steve Simmons, remains a fan of Jacob Trouba, the former Rangers captain who was just recently traded. They could consider pursuing him at the NHL deadline if a team like Anaheim or another party is willing to retain a significant portion of his salary. So I want to start with this. We have a bunch of other things to go over. An article dropped as well revealing a blockbuster trade here, but it's interesting because they could have gotten him. They could have made a trade for him with the New York Rangers, although we will dive into some things which may have stopped that here in a minute. But what are your thoughts on this?
They could have gotten him from the New York Rangers if they are interested in him. And again, take this with a grain of salt from Steve Simmons. But I do think that it probably is true that Leafs management would be interested in a guy like Jacob Trouba. And I think Jacob Trouba could help the Toronto Maple Leafs at the right dollar amount. So yes, they could have traded for him from the New York Rangers, but the Rangers did not want to retain salary. We all knew that. It was out there. There was a report that Chris Drury did not want to retain any type of salary on that trade. And so he didn't. And now being with Anaheim, I think, is going to want to flip this player either this season or next season. He has one more year on his deal. And they're in a situation where they might be restarting a rebuild. Like they don't even really know what they're doing. So I think that there's a real possibility here where Anaheim is going to retain a ton of salary. And if you get a third team involved, which we're going to get into, you can retain even more salary. So Jacob Trouba on the Leafs at maybe $3 million would really, really help the team. And I think it's something that, GMs get creative now. You can make something work if you really want it to work. So I think it's very intriguing. I think Jacob Trouba would help the Leafs in terms of, if you were to pair him with a guy like Morgan Riley, nobody could tell me that this team isn't a cup contender with a lineup like that. It would be pretty scary, honestly. I think that would be the best defensive core we may have ever seen for the Toronto Maple Leafs. And again, Jacob Trouba, I think he's still a very useful defenseman in this league, just not at his $8 million cap hit, right? So I think it's very interesting. I think that there could be some truth to the fact that the Leafs management, would like that player. It's just, it might be a little bit difficult to get it done, but the Leafs do have some assets they can give up, and we'll get into a trade scenario in a bit.
Yeah, Jacob Trouba, very good defenseman still. He obviously wanted out of New York. He wanted out of Winnipeg as well when he was there, so he maybe doesn't have too much loyalty to the teams he's playing for. But an article dropped here, and it said, could the Maple Leafs land Jacob Trouba in a blockbuster trade? If a trade were to happen between the Leafs and the Ducks, which we've seen in the past, they wouldn't be afraid to make a blockbuster move. It's been reported the Ducks are willing to trade Trouba, which we know, which would be the only way that a trade would work for Toronto because of their tight cap situation. Like you mentioned, the $8 million is way out of their out of their realm of possibility, out of their league here. If the clubs can make a move with a third team involved, Toronto's defense would be one of the best in the league on paper, and it is clear they have a very good defensive core, and we'll kind of discuss it. It's a trade between the Ducks, the Leafs, and the Blackhawks with some salary being retained. So we'll get into the trade here in a second, but this is how it would look before we get into the exact trade with Jacob Trouba. So you'd have McCabe, Tanev, Riley, Trouba, OEL, Hakanpää, or at least something along that, but you're also getting Taylor Hall in this. And again, this is just a complete rumor. Take this with a grain of salt, but this is, of course, a report here. But something alongside this, and I don't know if they're going to get Taylor Hall and Jacob Trouba, but kind of goes to show, like you can see here, Toronto gets Taylor Hall from the Blackhawks. They also get Jacob Trouba. Anaheim retains 50%. So they get the upgrade to their wing that, they've debatably been looking for. And the Ducks get Connor Timmins and Nick Robertson, 2 picks and a prospect. So you're sending off Connor Timmins, who's been really good, probably selling high on Connor Timmins here, and you're getting back, you're basically just replacing Connor Timmins with Jacob Trouba. And it's interesting because when you think about a Jacob Trouba trade, I could see a world where they send a defenseman out in order to get him back in because they obviously are loaded with defensemen. Maybe a team would be interested in Philippe Myers. There's a potential for, a trade with that player, of course, with draft capital and Nick Robertson involved. But it's basically Connor Timmins at pick and Nick Robertson for Trouba and Hall here. But at the very least, I like the Trouba framework with another team, specifically, Anaheim retaining 50% salary, which would bring it down to about 4, maybe even retaining a little more.
Yeah, they can retain up to 50%. If you get another team involved, they can retain a little bit. So again, like I brought up, Jacob Trouba at 3 million, that's not so bad. You can make that work. And Connor Timmins, I think he's had a great season, but the Leafs are in a cup window right now, about 2 to 3 years. If they don't do and make some serious damage this year and next year, I'm getting a little bit worried about, how old everyone's getting in the cap situation, right? So if you can get a guy like Jacob Trouba for, Connor Timmins, Nick Robertson, who, don't really, I don't think factor into the lineup come playoff time or won't be big factors if they're still around. More so Nick Robertson than Connor Timmins. I think Connor Timmins actually been pretty good. I think it would be a significant upgrade. You're still mobile on the blue line with OEL, with Riley, right? I don't think that's a problem. You have some puck movers still. I think Jacob Trouba is an underrated offensive player. When he came to New York, they were using him in a shutdown role. I don't know if that's exactly his game. He's the hardest hitting player in the NHL as well. So you would add that to your lineup. I think it could be a very interesting option. Now with Taylor Hall in the mix, that gets a little bit more interesting, right? You're adding more scoring to your lineup. That could be really good. I don't know how the salary works exactly with that. Again, there would have to be some retained salary. Again, they could make it work if they wanted to. But Nick Robertson, I'm not sure he's long for this lineup or this team. So getting rid of him, Connor Timmins in return, you get a lot better, I think, in both areas. So could be very interesting. I think that the Leafs probably do have interest in Jacob Trouba. They can get it done if they really wanted to. I think Chicago's been a, underrated trade partner for the Toronto Maple Leafs. If they wanted to get something done, I think they'd be a really good trade partner in terms of, making salary caps work. So, or salaries work, I should say. So it's very interesting.
Yeah, I like it. And your forward group would be Nyes, Matthews, Marner, which I hate. Hall, Tavares, and Nylander. So
Yep.
if we could replace Nylander with Marner there, then I think that would work very well. And I'm hoping they do that ahead of tonight's game as well, of course, with the forwards and the lines and things like that. And also one other thing to note, it was reported that the Canadian teams like Ottawa and Montreal were looking to acquire Trouba before he was shipped, but those reports claim that Trouba wasn't interested in returning north of the border, which suggests all 7 Canadian clubs are on his 15-team no-trade list, which is something to keep in mind as well. That being said, it says, it's implying that all teams would be on his no-trade list. That being said, it was only Ottawa and Montreal that were mentioned, 2 teams that are not necessarily, absolutely not Stanley Cup contenders, I will go as far to say. So maybe he's just looking to compete there as well. So it's going to be very interesting to see what happens specifically with this. It's a bit of a shocking report because they could have went and got him at like a week ago at the waiver deadline and things like that. But if he didn't want to come to Toronto, maybe that'll change at the deadline depending how things are with Anaheim. But we've also seen, if you watch some of his interviews when he got traded, he maybe want to settle down in Anaheim for a little bit because we know he cares obviously a lot about, as he should, his family and things like that. So that's probably, but again, with Anaheim, if they're looking to trade him, it could be a Rangers situation V2 all over again. But one other thing before we wrap up, Darius, just want to get your quick thoughts on it. Max Domi is questionable for tonight's game, and Jake McCabe is out once again. So probably have a video on the McCabe thing. It's getting weirder and weirder. I predicted this once it happened. I said I hope it doesn't happen, that he misses a ton of games. He is, and Anthony Solaris is also in the net tonight. We'll be live following the game. So any quick thoughts on the game before we wrap up?
Yeah, getting a little concerned on the Jake McCabe front. Hopefully he's okay. Maybe it's just maintenance. So hopefully he gets back into the lineup soon. Max Domi, game time decision. It should be fun to see if he gets back into the lineup. Obviously, if he's not 100%, don't put him back in the lineup. And then Anthony Stolar is getting a start where he grew up in New Jersey. So that's going to be fun for him. And one last note on Jacob Trouba before we move on. There was a report that all 7 Canadian teams were on his no trade list, but Anaheim also was on his no trade list, but he waived because, obviously there was a very interesting situation there in New York. He waived that to go to Anaheim. So I think anything is possible if Leafs management, maybe could talk to him or are allowed to talk to him. Maybe they can convince him, hey, you know what, try and win a Stanley Cup here. In Anaheim, you're not going to do much there. They might trade you to another team where you won't have a chance to do that. Maybe you can come win a Stanley Cup here. And they would have to keep him for 1 more year because, again, his contract is 1 more year, but I think it's very interesting.
Yeah, and a lot of that's going to rely on whether him and his wife want to move again, because that was his biggest factor, was
that too.
Her and her work. So it'll be interesting, changing countries. But that'll wrap it up. Let us know down below what your thoughts are. And again, thank you to rentals.ca for sponsoring this video. Check them out in the pinned comment in the description down below. We'll see you guys later.